did today. Today is history. Don't just go home and say, hey, let me post it. Live it.
Listen to her.
Change. We just have to be stubborn enough. We just have to be strong enough. We just have to be relentless.
How do we fix it? We didn't break it.
Guys, thank you all. I pass the mic to the next person. Black women matter.
Hello everyone, and welcome to an interview today with Martina Kunnecke. She's running for mayor this year and had the pleasure of sitting down with her today. We are at Shawnee Golf Course actually, and we're going to be talking about a number of subjects, but I wanted to start by introducing Ms. Kunnecke and getting to know her and sort of an introductory speech, if you will. Ms. Kunnecke, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Maxwell. How are you?
I am all right. It's been quite the day, but I'm excited to be here with you to get to know you, hear a little bit more about you. I know you've been involved in a number of forums, interviews, and you know, you've quite the history in this city, know quite a bit about it, and I'm happy to have met you and just to learn a bit about what you've been through all these many years. Tell me, how long have you lived here in Louisville?
Well, I was actually born and raised in Louisville. There was a period of time during my marriage, before I was divorced, I lived in Atlanta for a bit in southern Indiana, but for the most part I have lived in Louisville. I've lived in many neighborhoods, but born and raised in the West End.
Understood. And I want to jump right to, there was a forum just these past couple of days at Mix Restaurant and Lounge. And I noticed there was an article that was released, I forget which news station specifically, but if I'm going to take a guess, it was WDRB, that it didn't have your name on it actually, you or mayoral candidate Manetta Lemkheitir. I was curious, why is that exactly?
Well, you know, folks have contacted me about that and they were really surprised and upset about it. I was not surprised because in my 20 years of serving the public as a volunteer for neighborhood advocacy, the media often shortchanges what I have to say or what my, fellow neighbors or the people that I'm working with have to say. So I was not surprised. But then when I actually looked at the article, I was pretty shocked. It appeared as if neither me or I can't pronounce her last name, Manetta, it appeared that we weren't even there. And it appeared that the forum was a dialogue between Mr. Dieruf and Mr. Greenberg. And that's very unsettling to the extent that they attempted, well, they didn't attempt to, they literally erased two candidates from the forum. And it's even more troubling that the two candidates that they chose to delete were two African American females. Speaking about subjects that I'm sure that they have studied and they've been briefed on, Mr. Dieruf and Mr. Greenberg, but both Manetta and I have been working directly in the community and have insights that could only come from folks that have dealt with real people in the community rather than be briefed by staff that we've paid. So it's very, very troubling what happened with that coverage.
Yeah, I too saw the article, and I was wondering. I didn't ask anyone or any questions, but I was curious as to why your name again and Manetta's name was not there. And as you said, the focus seemed to be on the two candidates, both Democratic and Republican. And on that note too, something I like to do in my interviews or videos in itself is provide a sense of education for the public. You know, I try not to assume, including myself, those watching know all the vocab, the lingo that is being heard on these live streams. So if you could take a second and explain, what is the difference between Democratic, Republican, and independent or write-in candidate?
Well, the reason I'm now an independent, I was a lifelong Democrat. The reason I'm no longer a Democrat, because in my mind and in the mind of many, there is no difference between those parties. We are now a uniparty country. And so But in terms of my own experience, when I saw that the two front runners, the Republican and the Democrat, represented more of the same, that is, white, fairly wealthy males running our government, it was just clear to me that it was time to end my day with the Democratic Party and run as an independent. In the state of Kentucky, you're forced to register as independent party. However, there is no independent party that I know of. They don't have conventions, they don't meet. It's just where folks who are not happy with the two major parties end up going. The write-in situation is very interesting because I have been politically active in previous elections where we were not happy with either the Republican or Democratic candidate, and we attempted to get folks to get their names on the ballot. And in Kentucky, if you're going to run as an independent, you have to declare, I think I had to declare in January or something, a letter of intent. No, it was by April. I had to declare a letter of intent. And then I was allowed to file in June. But I had to change my party before that. So you see, it's complicated. It's not something where you can just jump ship easily. And even write-in candidates, and I mention that because I think Kentucky is unique in how they've structured this. And they've structured it in a way to make it difficult, in my view, for folks who are not on board with the major party candidates to run a candidate. Even the write-in candidates, and I know there's quite a few this time, not for the mayoral race, but for a couple of races.
Indeed.
But they had to declare they were going to run long before even to be a write-in candidate. So it's not like in some places where you can just write in a candidate's name and it will get counted. If you write in a candidate's name and they have not pre-registered that they're going to be a write-in candidate, it'll just get tossed to the side. So to me, all of it is confusing, and all of it appears to me to be a way to keep the public herded into those two pathways, either Democrat or Republican, no matter what that means.
Now, it's an interesting phrase you used there, and which leads me to another question on my mind and heart, actually, which comes from a bit of education from my time here at protesting, marching, and getting a lot of education in different areas, but one of those being on the Civilian Review Board. There were a series of workshops happening since the date of May 28, 2020, not that started on that date, but anyway, one of the things I've learned is that the Civilian Review and Accountability Board is something that the community wants, but as I've learned, it doesn't seem to have a lot of backbone. And I'm curious, if you were elected mayor, what are one of the things or something that you could do to strengthen that Civilian Review and Accountability Board so it can be more beneficial to the community and to the public?
Well, the first thing I intend to do is to disband any board that they have pulled together under the Fisher administration. This is not our first day at the rodeo in terms of trying to provide citizen oversight for this very troubling issue of how to get LMPD on the right track. And generally it's this hand-picked committee of folks. There'll be a few folks that are real community people, but for the most part it's like every other committee or task force or whatever that is pulled together. There is an elite hierarchy that they pull from. And so that means the results you're going to get is a lot of platitudes, a lot of grandstanding, a lot of wringing hands. Well, we'd like to do more, but we don't have subpoena power, we don't have this, that, and the other. So the first thing I would do is scrap everything that is being done now. A mayor that has been part of the problem is not the best resource on improving the conditions that we have with LMPD. I'm sorry. So I would scrap what's being done now and start from the beginning. Also, I'm curious as to, because I get mixed information about what is within our power in terms of establishing a board and giving that board some power. This board, whatever we want to call it, needs to be citizen-driven.
Agreed.
It needs to be empowered to subpoena any records that they need, any materials that they need to make some sort of determination. And it needs the power to dictate what punishment or what solutions need to come into play. What we keep forgetting as a community is that LMPD works for us. LMPD works for us.
Exactly.
But yet the community has no purview over how they operate and over, getting some answers from them. Things have just been flipped upside down. And that's the way it is with most of our public officials, actually. Many of our public officials have forgotten they work for us. But yet when you interact with many of them, they treat you as if you're a serf. This is not a feudal system. This is a republic with democratic processes, and they work for us. So I probably went on a bit too long, but that's where I would begin. That's where I would begin, to see what is it within the power of the mayor's office, what can be done to give real teeth to a citizens review board for LMPD.
And speaking of giving teeth, it brings me to my next question. The police calls in themselves. It's quite often that a lot of police calls, and I can't give you statistics right now, but just things that I've heard from the community or seen myself, as I tend to live stream a lot of police calls and whatnot, those that I hear about or am able to get to anyway. But they don't need police presence, rather someone who can answer a mental health call or a social worker, indeed. And I think, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it's the deflection program seeks to do that very thing, if you will. Now, I heard you say earlier that you would dismantle projects, programs, or whatnot that the mayor has instilled and whatnot. How would you go about that as it relates to the need of more mental health workers and police calls in lieu of what we currently have now?
Well, as you may be aware, a lot of what we told is happening and is functional. Many times when you look behind the curtain, things are not functioning the way you're told that they are. And a lot of these programs and approaches have been brought forth to kind of, tell the public there's nothing to see here. We're doing something new. We're really improving. So the first thing I will do as mayor is to do a forensic analysis or audit, if you will, to see if we are really getting the services that we think we are getting or that we've been told we're getting. If there's something that's working fine, no problem. But that's the first step that I would take. Also, I do believe that triaging some of these problems that you alluded to, Maxwell, is very important, because it's true, there's some things that a social worker or some other professional could handle, at least on the front end. So I'm all for that approach, that diversionary approach. But I just want to make sure that what we're told is happening really does happen.
Now, I'm curious as if you saw or were in attendance at there was a Metro Council meeting, I believe this past Thursday. They were speaking about houselessness and panhandling and whatnot, and Erica Shields, Chief of Police, said something interesting, that the police should not be the face of combating houselessness, in which I agree. But, I'm curious, if you were elected mayor, what would be your method of approaching houselessness and diminishing it?
I tell you, that is such a, well, here's the thing. This is one area where I agree with Erica Shields. The police should not be on the front line in terms of dealing with houselessness. It's such a massive problem, and I almost hate going into it, because being a systems person, I tend to think of our government failing in that it is not, it's good, it's not good, they don't do a good job of it, but it's like plugging the dike all the time. So that's the mentality. Let's plug the dike here, let's plug the dike there, and let's move the houseless here. Let's move, I'm going to use homeless because, and this is why I'm going to use it, because people deserve a home.
Yes.
Home means you have security, you have control, you have something that belongs to you. And house in this economy is almost an insult to use that, because very few people, fewer and fewer people are able to afford to buy a house. So this issue is such a large issue, and we always channel it down to, what are we going to do with these people that are sleeping on the street here? What are we going to do with the people that are sleeping under the underpass? Let's throw them some clothes that they're not going to be able to store in any way. Let's give them a place to take a quick shower. It's like let's just kind of erase the unsightliness of it, but let's not go to the root of it. We have to face the fact as a culture that in the last 50 years, the cost of housing has risen like 100+%. And in that same 50 years, income has only risen, what, 15%?
Exactly.
Come on now. There are reasons that people are not only sleeping on the street, under underpasses, they're also sleeping in their cars after they've worked at McDonald's all day. They are also sleeping at their mother's house or at a friend's house. They're going from couch to couch, week to week. This is a serious issue. And meanwhile, we have, instead of government taking care of the issue, we have turned it completely over to the private entity. And it is the private interests that are driving the prices up and up and up. It's the private interests that are swallowing up all the available real estate to build what they want to build. They talk about market housing, market level housing, but that means lots of money that people cannot afford. Market level housing is not what we're needing now. We need housing that people can afford on salaries that have not substantially risen in 50 years more than 10 or 15%.
And with that, I do agree with you on so many points you just made, and it leads me to the next question too. And within the same Metro Council meeting, there was a focus on giving voting rights back to felons. Those who are felons, giving voting rights. What are your thoughts on that, and how would you go about that if elected mayor of Louisville?
You know, I'm a researcher by profession, and so I've done a lot of research in jails and places of incarceration around the country, actually. And the first thing that you notice, you know about it, but then when you see it, it's very shocking, is how many people are incarcerated that probably shouldn't even be there. So that's,
I agree.
You know, that's like the basis of my thinking. And then also the fact that when you take someone from their home to incarcerate them, you are contributing to the breakdown of the community already. Then when you put that person back in the community and say, because of a mistake you may or may not have made, or a crime you may or may not have committed, you're going to have to pay for that for the rest of your life or for an extended period of time by not being able to vote. Everyone has a right to have a say in who their elected officials are going to be. So as mayor, I would strongly support efforts to restore voting rights to those who have been incarcerated.
I have an interesting question for you next, one that I think of on a weekly basis. I want to remark on the date of May 28th, 2020, when thousands of people stormed into 6th and Jefferson, demanding justice for Breonna Taylor, an end to police brutality, end to militarization of police, and a plethora of other things. Since that date, that fight continues, of course. But my question to you is, with what people stormed into the street to fight against, into our current state now, Is it in your opinion that justice was had?
You know, that was such a complex time in our city's history, but it was a pivotal one, I believe. I don't believe justice has been served yet, and hope springs eternal. Things move slowly with the Justice Department. I believe their final report, we're still waiting for that. But there's a couple of things I want to say about the Breonna Taylor situation in general. This horrible thing that happened to that young woman and to the larger community was a long time coming. It was bound to come because of leadership that for decades has ignored the problems that we have with our police force. And so it's not as if violence has not occurred at the hands of LMPD before. It has repeatedly occurred. And over again, we've had incidents of murder, maiming, terrorizing by LMPD. And we all sort of go, you know, oh, that's horrible, and we wring our hands, and we let our public officials kind of smooth it over and delay a response. And so, unfortunately, the Breonna Taylor situation was bound to happen because we've not had leadership that took the reports from the community, the concerns from the community, all over the community, long before Breonna Taylor, were just ignored or minimized by leadership. Leadership is everything in this community. And we've just had leadership that has taken us to places that we should have never gone. And there has never been justice for the most horrendous outcomes. Ms. Taylor, the Explorer situation with the exploitation of those children. It's as if, well, you know, the black community, the poor community, they can just, you know, it's just too bad, they can put up with anything. That is unacceptable, and it comes from leadership.
That's an interesting word, and I want to squeeze in a question for you. Not just an interesting word, but a true word. It needed leadership. One of the things I was curious about from you and your perspective, Mayor Fisher stated that on a few times that his presence out there at these protests, at rallies, at marches, would have caused more harm than good, have not helped de-escalate things. And you know, in my personal opinion, which I try not to give too much, but the act of that leadership being there needed to be there. But I guess now my question to you, a little more bluntly, is if you were mayor of Louisville during that time, during that era, what would you have done as far as?
Well, if I were mayor of Louisville, I don't think we ever would have been there because we would have had a civilian review board. We would have had guidelines about how to treat some of the previous crimes that have been committed against the community. We would have been looking at our police force in a different way. You know, there's some folks that should not be on the force. So first of all, we never would have been there. But if, say, I, you know, came in after Fisher and there was something of that magnitude that happened, I definitely think it would be appropriate to go out and talk to the people and make some statements about what's acceptable and what's not. Now, it's interesting you should say that because at one point I believe he did go out and speak. And in fact, one of our community partners from his neighborhood called me outraged. She said, he's acting as if he's not part of the problem. He is the problem. Mm-hmm. And I said, you are absolutely right. So on one hand, I think it's important for a mayor to stand up and say, these things are going to be dealt with appropriately. I mean, you wouldn't want him to speak before a process had taken place in terms of investigation and whatever, but to make it plain that brutality is just not acceptable. And but then on the other hand, that would kind of be in keeping with the way this administration has done things. They have always been able to capture the narrative and spin it to their advantage.
I agree.
And so, and that particular person and other people that did call about that one incident, I don't think he did it a lot, but there was at least one time when he did come out, and it was offensive to people because he's part of the problem, if not the root of the problem.
Ms. Kunnecke, another question I wanted to ask you was referring to illegal guns on the street currently. You know, I can't tell you or spout out statistics right now as it relates to violence and gun violence. And my question to you is, what are your ways or thoughts on combating or getting illegal guns off the street?
That's going to be a tough one. Now, I'm told that the police or the authorities know where folks have guns and that they have some knowledge of at least some of the illegal guns that are on the street. And if that's the case, we need to look into why they are not doing something about that. Frankly, it's just going to be a difficult thing to turn around. Now, I know Greenberg says, oh, I'm going to get guns off the street and I'm going to pass laws and whatever. And certainly as mayor, I would attempt to do so. But I'm afraid the horse is out of the barn. You know, we had horrible legislation from our legislature several years ago that allowed almost anybody to carry a gun, openly carry. So we will try to walk that back. But I don't want to be like other candidates and make promises that I know are going to be difficult to bring about. Certainly, I will push as hard as I can as a mayor for legislation that's at least going to give us laws to help control, to get illegal guns off the street. But we need to be realistic about where we are. Kentucky, man, I mean, that has just been, it was horrible that legislation ever passed that just opened up the doors for people to own legal guns, and then depending upon governments to get the illegal guns off the street. I'm all for the laws. I'm just not sure how far they will go. But I would support the laws and I would support enforcement of those laws.
Understood. We're going to take a small break and come back with just a couple more questions and a wrap up with here at, again, the Shawnee Golf Course. Sitting down with mayoral candidate Martina Kunnecke.
Are you ready to transform your organization? Shawnee Solutions provides capacity building services for leaders and teams ranging from strategic planning, program evaluation, and organization management training. For more information, please visit shawnee.solutions.
Good morning and welcome to Brew and Sip, where you get your drip. We also have 2 locations, one at 505 West Broadway or meet us at 3800 Shepherdsville Road, where you can hold your business meeting or just meet with friends. Have a delicious cup of our drip as well as our smoked chicken salad. We hope to see you soon. Welcome back to the live.
Here we are. We're back here at Shawnee Golf Course, sitting down with mayoral candidate Martina Kunnecke. We're just going to ask a couple more questions here and wrap this up. I don't want to take up too much of her time. Ms. Martina, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I noticed at the mayoral forum at Mix Restaurant and Lounge, there was a question of Michael Jackson v. Prince. What would be your favorite artist and whatnot, and favorite coffee shop? I'll tell you a small funny tidbit. As I was holding a cup of Starbucks, as people were, speaking of their favorite coffee shop. But so there goes mine. But I wanted to ask you again, what would be your favorite coffee? If you were to have one right now, what would you pick?
My favorite coffee? Well, unfortunately, Heine, I used to go to Heine Brothers, but they have closed some locations. And so my answer at the forum was my own coffee. And
yes.
Partially because I don't really want to go to a national chain, although I do sometime, but our local coffee shops are very important.
They are.
They're very important.
I often find myself at Center Goss Coffee. It's a
Okay,
very
yeah.
delicious drink.
Yeah,
They make
Preston.
delicious
There's a
drinks
good
there.
one on Preston. Yeah.
Preston,
Yeah.
Woodlawn Avenue, of course, and a few other locations around the city. Ms. Martina, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down here with me at Shawnee Golf Course and answer a few questions about that were on my mind and may hopefully have been on others' minds who are watching this live stream. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the public before we wrap up?
I just want to say that when you vote on November 8th, to remember what we've been through for the last 12 years and to think about what our city would be like if we had new leadership, not leadership rooted in wealth and the same old crew leading us down the same old path. Vote carefully, vote wisely. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to sit down with you. Well, if you do nothing else, I hope you stay live.
Thank you.